So following my recent run-in with Graham and Linehan, go check my other videos on that, I got sent a video by Caroline Franssen, aka Twitter user Coach Caroline. Caroline Franssen, for those who don't know, is the founder of the Relatie Academie in the Netherlands, which as far as I can tell is just a fancy name for her relationship therapy practice. She is also the self-declared initiator of the Dutch debate and StopSelfID movements and a proud supporter of Linehan's work. Want proof? Well, the website she links on her Twitter, StopSelfID.nl, has a link to Graham Linehan's blog post along with the rest of the shitbag squad. So I can say with relative certainty that Caroline Franssen posted that video as a means of supporting Linehan's support for gender identity conversion efforts. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot they prefer to call it gender critical therapy. The video itself is titled, "If Conversion Therapy is Bad, Why is Sex Reassignment Good?" And seeing that title, I think we all know what's coming. The video is by an American group known as What Would You Say?, which is a far-right Christian organization that, among other things, attacks abortion access and preaches that homosexuality is a sin. Because that's the sort of people writing in to defend Graham Linehan and his position. Groups such as What Would You Say?, the Heritage Foundation, and the Daily Fail, not to forget those who treat them as an authority. Far-right Christian organizations or fascist rags that seek to destroy every major social advancement the human species has made the past couple of centuries. Now, I responded to Franssen's tweet very bluntly with a question asking, what scientifically illiterate trash is this? For which she blocked me. Well, okay, that's her right. I'm just amazed it was so easy. However, it's also my right to go through the video and point out how the source she turns to for information is so full of shit, to offer example of how to challenge this imported bigotry for my Dutch siblings. So let's get down to business.
One trick of LGBT activists is changing the meaning of words. We see this in the way they celebrate sex reassignment as gender affirmation, but condemn conversion therapy as sex reassignment.
What you just said there has no basis in reality. Yes, sex reassignment surgery has shifted towards gender confirmation as language and scientific understanding of the field has evolved. But no one has ever referred to conversion therapy, more accurately described as conversion torture, as sex reassignment. Just over 20 seconds into the video and we already have a pure fabrication designed to set up a fictional position for the video to respond to and refute. A strawman position that does not accurately reflect the language used by either the LGBT+ community or the medical community. So already, we're off to a bad start. Also, the example you showed of changing the meaning of a word didn't change any words. It displayed changes to a secular institution that was co-opted in Europe by the Catholic Church in 1188 when the Council of Verona made marriage a sacrament. Later, the Roman Catholic Council of Trent of 1563 made church involvement mandatory. Now, prior to this, the church had already meddled with marriage, they just hadn't claimed it as sacred. Most notably in the 4th century Common Era, during the Christianization of Rome, the church changed the legal definition of marriage to exclude same-gender couples under penalty of death. So maybe read up on your history. This is how the video Franssen forwarded in defense of Graham Linehan starts, with an open attack on same-gender couples. This is what happens when you open the door for transphobia. It's only a matter of time before homophobia and biphobia follow.
Let's imagine there's a 6-year-old boy named Johnny, and Johnny experiences gender dysphoria. He says he wants to be a girl. The science shows that in at least 80% of the cases, gender dysphoria eventually goes away on its own. So, if Johnny and his parents do nothing, the odds are that by the time Johnny goes through puberty, his gender dysphoria will go away.
Except that's not what the research shows at all. I know, as I've actually read it. Whilst What Would You Say fails to reference the actual study, this common statistic comes from a 2011 article titled Desisting and Persisting Gender Dysphoria After Childhood, a qualitative follow-up study, which found a desistance rate of 84.2%. However, the text is somewhat misleading. The study did not qualify feelings of gender dysphoria on a clinical diagnosis of the condition, but simply referral to gender identity clinics by untrained adults. Clinics which take the scientifically grounded gender affirmation approach. Gender affirmation, for those who don't know, is an approach to gender which prioritizes child-led exploration. All it prescribes is support for said child. If they wake up and want to go by he pronouns, use he pronouns. If they want to use she pronouns, use she pronouns. If they change their mind next day or midday, let them. That is gender affirmation, supporting your child as they explore who they are. When you do that, as noted, 84.2% of children referred to said clinics and supported under the gender affirmative approach do not seek out further support. The study also found differences between the two groups in how they express themselves, something a follow-up analysis published in 2013 would support, stating, quote, "Persisters indicated that they believed that they were the other sex, and desisters indicated they wished they were the other sex," end quote. So put rather plainly, what would you say is misleading its viewers in this section? That 80% stat only discusses gender dysphoria if we change the qualifier for gender dysphoria to being referenced to a clinic by an untrained adult, someone who does not understand the difference between gender identity and gender expression. And since that is the qualifier for gender dysphoria used, the notion of doing nothing is equally misleading. Gender affirmation is about helping a child reach the best resolution possible, and for the vast majority of children referred to such clinics, they receive no further support. Why? Well, because it turns out that the specialists in the field actually know how to do their job and are not forcing children to be transgender. That is a bold-faced lie. Speaking of which...
However, if a therapist or doctor were to help Johnny get over his gender dysphoria and counsel him in a way that helped him identify as a boy, this would be described as conversion therapy. In several states, it's illegal. In those states, the only thing a therapist is allowed to do with a child who has experienced gender dysphoria is to help them embrace their identity as the opposite sex. If they don't, they would be professionally punished or even lose their license.
Actually, both doctors should lose their licenses. Thankfully, there are no cases of therapists forcing a child to be a gender other than that they were assigned at birth. The closest to that we find are doctors forcing intersex patients to conform to either a male or female gender. And people such as myself are the ones seeking to combat that practice. You are simply lying about gender affirmative care. Why? Well, because you have no case against the actual practice, so instead have to make a phantom version you can demonize. And it's not like your viewers are going to be critical of that. Hell, you've managed to fool actual therapists from different disciplines. Yet the moment you actually have an understanding of the practice, the lie becomes glaringly obvious. But that doesn't stop it being propagated in real life, as seen with the Luna Damon Younger case, a particularly brutal case that gained a lot of attention last year. What the Christian right was pretending was a case of a liberal mum forcing their son to be a girl turned out to be a case of an abusive father using his daughter's identity as a means to hurt his former wife. Whilst in public the father pretended like he allowed Luna to do what she wanted, under oath his story changed. Under oath he admitted to refusing to have girls' clothes in the house, to refusing to use Luna's actual name and pronouns, to shaving his daughter's head against court order, to constantly belittling his daughter for her choices. The only reason his story gained so much traction is because the mother, who took their child to multiple therapists when the father initially took issue with the first opinion, felt her daughter deserved privacy. Privacy the father could not respect. The truth is, Forcing a child to deny who they are is destructive, and we most often see that in gender identity conversion efforts to force a child to adhere to their assigned gender, something that increases attempted suicide from around 8% to 57% in trans people. Another study which conducted research of 27,715 transgender adults living in the US, 3,869 of which had been exposed to GICE, found that, quote, exposure to GICE before the age of 10 years was significantly associated with several measures of suicidality, including lifetime suicide attempts, end quote. Meanwhile, gender affirmation has been found to reduce levels of anxiety and depression in trans adolescents to levels equal to a cisgender control, to general society. Gender affirmation works, demonstrably. Gender identity conversion efforts amount to nothing but torture. And that is a science the creators of this video have to ignore.
However, if a therapist assures Johnny that he is really a girl, gives him puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and then helps him get surgery that removes healthy body parts and permanently sterilizes him, this is referred to as gender affirmation. That is legal in all 50 states.
No, that's referred to as a lie. Children do not receive hormone replacement therapy or surgery. At most, they will receive fully reversible and safe puberty blockers as they enter Tanner Stage 2, averaging around 12 years of age. This is a medical necessity. Denying them this would be akin to denying a diabetic insulin because they're underage. Now, some rare cases may receive blockers much earlier than 12. This is because the usage of blockers is tied to puberty and not to any arbitrary age. Therefore, if a child suffers precocious puberty, aka early onset puberty, they may receive the blockers earlier. But here's a fun fact about that. Do you know what the treatment for precocious puberty, a condition that carries with it various harmful physical but more importantly psychological effects, has been for the past 30 years? Puberty blockers. Not tested my macular arse. That's one of the many things the medications are used for. That and hormone-sensitive cancers. So the only instance of children being prescribed puberty blockers at a young age is if they'd receive them anyway. So it's really a 2-for-1 in that situation. Point is, if you want to argue against puberty blockers for trans children on grounds that they're unsafe yet fail to do so for cis children with precocious puberty, you're a selective bastard with a bigoted agenda who is merely concern policing. Also, don't think I can't see what you're doing with the visual propaganda, keeping the character as a child who remains unhappy as they go through the procedures, not to mention the incredibly gross stereotypes of trans people shown throughout the video.
But isn't it interesting the words they use to describe these situations? Helping a child identify with the body they were born with is called conversion therapy. Giving a child artificial hormones and plastic surgery is called gender affirmation. If that seems backwards to you, that's because it is.
Forcing a child to adhere to their birth-assigned gender is not helping, a fact clearly demonstrated earlier. The very notion that you would attempt to pass it off as such shows just how grossly dishonest you are, a fact that transfers from the creators of the video to people such as Caroline Franssen when they attempt to use it to defend Graham Linehan's support for gender identity conversion attempts. Franssen is not some layperson like Linehan. They're a therapist, and yet they're more than happy to turn to a video that not only demonizes trans people, but all LGBT+ people, all to defend Graham Linehan. Now what's interesting is that unlike Linehan, who is from Ireland, a country which has yet to outlaw conversion therapy, Franssen lives in the Netherlands, a country which last year voted to not only ban conversion attempts, but passed a motion that stated those guilty of it would be punished. Now there was no timetable given, but for all intents and purposes, conversion therapy is illegal in the Netherlands now. So one has to consider what this means for Franssen, Because I hope to hell that none of the people she sees are families bringing their child to her because they believe their child's gender nonconformity is a relationship problem. I also wonder what Franssen's clients would think if they knew she was sending videos demonizing same-gender couples to people. Because transphobia aside, the social debate on homosexuality is long lost, so I think that could do a lot of damage to this picture Franssen has created of herself. I checked out her website, not the StopSelfID site that she links on her Twitter, though I did check that one out as well, and yes, she used the thoroughly debunked rapid onset gender dysphoria article. I mean the Relationship Academie website. I don't know what it is, every time I say that name I get total Prager University vibes. Now, in her About Me section, she spins such a pretty story. One about how she grew up bullied, and though she moved on, her bullies did too, and how that made her want to reach out and be compassionate towards others. And yet here she is, happily spreading lies put out by Christian fascists. Lies about LGBT+ people created as an attempt to hurt one of the most marginalized and vulnerable communities, seemingly because she has an irrational hatred towards us. So she advocates for the youngest among us to be tortured in order to put them back on the straight and narrow. That, my friends, is the truth of Caroline Franssen. She's not a compassionate woman, she's just a run-of-the-mill bigot who feels big in hurting others. Ignorance on her part can only be willful, and therefore be no excuse. Now, if you appreciate what myself and Adita do here on the channel, do know that you can support us on Patreon. Your support gives us the funds to keep going and keep putting out videos involving this level of research. You can also check out our other videos to see more of what we have to offer. So with that said, we'd just like to thank our Patreon sponsors, giving a special thanks to the following people: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, Soraya and Katie, Moat Gay, Wellington Marcus, Atlas5, and Sash Daniels. And from myself and Adita, take care now.